Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy, back again with my friend Dr. Dan Wilson, a working molecular biologist and host of Debunk the Funk with Dr. Wilson. Hi Dan, how are you today?
Hey Bob, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing better now that I hit record. We did an entire episode not long ago, and I happened to glance down and I saw the record button wasn't on. I mean, I checked it this time, so we're good. Hey, today, Dan, I'd like to talk about one of the minor members of the Disinformation Dozen, Mr. Larry Cook. He used to be a much bigger fish than he is right now. He used to have a 200,000 member Facebook page, one of the largest anti-vax Facebook pages. However, they shut him down. He tried to sue, saying that he had given up his full-time job to be an advocate, and now he didn't have any income anymore. Woe is me. I don't think that went anywhere. Are you familiar with Mr. Cook at all?
So I actually haven't looked too much into his content, but I have heard some stories about him and the impact that his Facebook group has had. So maybe we'll get to that story at some point.
All right. One of the reasons that Mr. Cook was taken off of Facebook was promotion of QAnon ideas and trying to merge QAnon and the anti-vax movement. This is a common technique where people, if you're trying to start a mass movement, one of the things that you might want to try and do is incorporate other groups that have like goals to join your group as well. And that's something that you see an awful lot of in the anti-vax movement. We've seen them appeal to parents worried about their children. We've seen them appeal to the medically ignorant, where we've had them raise the specter of autism, which is something that no parent, I think, really looks forward to the idea of having an autistic child. You want your child to be perfect, and it's a terrible fear for new parents. What Mr. Cook is doing is trying to bring in the QAnon mentality, where there is a Illuminati and a hidden hand that controls our lives, this malevolent, shadowy figure that plans our lives out for us. You familiar with this mentality?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what card-carrying conspiracy theorists have to believe, that there is some shadowy force or organization controlling things, hiding things, and keeping things secret from behind the curtain.
And this, Mr. Cook specifically, is approaching this from a little bit more of a political or governmental, anti-governmental approach, as opposed to, trying to appeal to the emotions of parents. And that was why he was taken off. However, he started a new channel, I guess. Well, not really a channel, a web page. He went from 200,000 people down to about 6,000 people. And he started this web page called Medical Freedom Patriots. Now, anytime you see the name Patriot in a web page or a YouTube channel, it's kind of like seeing Truther in a Flat Earth channel.
It's not a good sign.
It's generally not a good sign. And I decided I wanted to have a quick look at this, but apparently he charges $5 a month to see his content. And that's how he is now making a living. Not going to fault a guy for wanting to make a living, but then again, I'm not going to pay him $5 to see derp. So if he wants to come here and share this and discuss some of his ideas with us, I think you and I would probably be game to have a nice chat with him, just a friendly cup of coffee, and invite him to have a chat about some of the stuff that normally people would have to pay for. But
sure, definitely.
But there's another thing that you see. He's not the only one that does this. Last time we talked about Del Bigtree. Now, here's an interesting thing from Del Bigtree. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here real quick. Well, as you know, we've been kind of undergoing a national trauma the last few years. On January 6th, 2021, there were a series of rallies in the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C., which ended up resulting in large numbers of people entering the Capitol and trying successfully, at least briefly, to disrupt the counting of electoral votes for our presidential election. Now, Del Bigtree was in Washington on January 6, 2021. basically recruiting people to the anti-vax movement. He was at a rally which was sponsored by Ty and Charlene Bollinger. We've already talked about them. And this quote right here is a good example of what I'm talking about, not only with this example from Dell, but from what we're seeing with Larry Cook. You know, it says here, I wish I could tell you I believe the CDC. I wish I could tell you that this pandemic is really dangerous. I wish I could believe that the voting machines worked, but none of this is happening.
Mm-hmm. Convenient for him to say such a thing.
There's a couple of things that you will see that professionals use. All right. There is a technique in speech where you talk about they will be mourned by their family and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that sent its sons to explore the unknown, where they repeat the same phrase 3 times to drive it home. You see how Dell was using that technique here. The other thing that you're seeing is that he is playing on the fears that the voting machines were rigged. That was why they were in the Capitol. So you see how he's trying to make his cause their cause by showing that it's the same thing. This is the technique that Larry Cook uses too with this Medical Freedom Patriots Truth or whatever he's got, you know, his little website here. And this is something that we really need to look out for when we're dealing with anti-vaxxers, is these subtle tools that they're using to manipulate us. They're using these rhetorical tricks to try and manipulate your psyche, play to your emotions, and play to something that you believe strongly about. All you would get out of that little speech was that, oh, these anti-vaxxers think the election was wrong too. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You know, they're playing on that little technique too, and that's something that Larry Cook does a lot. That's really what I wanted to talk about with Larry Cook. It's kind of a shorter episode today because he's really not all that consequential. But this is something just to demonstrate that they are trying to reach out to other fringe groups like QAnon and try and find common ground with them. And this is being mirrored by the other anti-vax Disinformation Dozen. You know, one of the techniques that's used in the anti-vax playbook that we'll talk about one of these days is they have these informational sites where you would go to a Facebook group if you want to hear information, all right, about vaccines. You want to hear the truth. You want to hear an alternative information that maybe your doctor's not giving you. So they have people that are trained in these sites to try and quote unquote answer your questions. Go ahead and give an example of one here.
Right. So I think just to start this, I think sometimes as science communicators, other scientists who or professionals in our field who look at us and see that we're spending time talking about flat earthers or QAnon or anti-vaxxers, they might say, well, why waste your time with them? Or even
Hear
with
it all the
something like
time.
they might say something like with QAnon, they're like, oh, that's just like a fringe group. Like basically the sentiment sometimes from colleagues is they're just a small minority of people and they're only going to hurt themselves. So let them be stupid. Well, I think it's important to realize that this disinformation does have real world consequences, and innocent people are often hurt by it. When it comes to Larry Cook and his Facebook group, where parents went to get health advice for their kids, that didn't end very well for one 4-year-old boy whose mother went to the Facebook group while he was so sick with the flu that he was having seizures and had a really high fever, and asked the members of the group for advice on what to do with her son, who, by the way, was not vaccinated against the flu. And they told her, don't take Tamiflu. No, take breast milk and thyme. And what was the other thing that they suggested?
Age, I think it was, wasn't it?
Elderberry.
Elderberry. Yep.
Yeah. So they told her, don't take Tamiflu, take breast milk and thyme and elderberry. Treat him with that. And unfortunately, that 4-year-old boy was later hospitalized and then died from the flu. That mother probably could have prevented that death, first by getting him vaccinated, and second, by treating him with medications that actually work against the virus that causes influenza.
Y-
So that's a real world example of an innocent person who was hurt by this disinformation, and it was totally preventable.
Two innocent people.
Yeah.
Because I think that not only was the child hurt, but there's going to come a day that that mother, it's really going to come home to her what she did. And you know, the only people that aren't hurt by this, the ones giving the advice, they don't care one way
Oh
or the
yeah.
other. If you're a view,
They can brush it off.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, hey, I, I wasn't giving her any medical advice. She could have just ignored us. We were just talking, you know?
Well, often the really sick and delusional thing that the people who are giving the disinformation will do is, in situations like that, often they'll blame the mother. They'll say that they didn't give enough breast milk, they didn't give enough time, they didn't give enough elderberry, or they didn't do this right, or they didn't do that right.
It's their fault.
If they only gave this quack medicine instead of that quack medicine, things would have been different. They don't own up and accept any responsibility.
No.
They just say that they just continue believing that they were right.
Yeah.
And it costs lives. And you're right, that mother will probably that mother probably will never seek advice from that Facebook group again. I hope.
Well, I know they won't
And
because the Facebook group was taken down for that sort of stuff. They were taken
well,
down for
that's true. That's
QAnon
true.
and, you know, multiple
That's
violations of
true.
the terms of service. As you say, we have better things to do with our lives. We have important work that we do. I wrote Dr. Andrew Young, who is the guru of refraction in the flat earth. I mean, they're constantly being quoted. He made it very clear to me that he thought the flat earth was absolutely the stupidest thing that he had ever heard of. He said, why is a physician wasting time with these people? And I said, well, basically, it's my hobby that I like to look at conspiracy theories and science denial and try and expose it and give people the tools they need to fight it. And his only response to me was, get a better hobby. So you see this attitude. And if you look at the Center for Control of Digital Hate, they say that people should not engage science denial or anti-vaxxers. That's people in general. But that professionals in the field, such as you and I, should counter it. But
Yes.
don't have lay people go out and just argue points with them because they're experts at arguing points. You know, if you ever listen to flat earth arguments, they have their script. They're very good at it. And, you know, you and I are quite bright people. We know the earth is rotating. Can you tell me exactly right now, without looking, how you can physically measure that the earth is rotating versus the sky turning over you?
Um, so it's funny because I actually follow some flat Earth accounts. I know that we can measure the Coriolis effect.
Okay,
That's one
so
answer.
yeah, well, it's an effect. It's not real. It's a fictitious force, which means that it's
Right.
fake. So it doesn't exist because it's
Oh,
fictitious.
oh,
So you
right,
see,
right, right. Yeah.
they have the answers. And if you know the script, you can predict it. And what they do is they generally tend to prey on people that never really thought about how you would actually check to see if it was the earth itself rotating. You know,
Hmm.
they never think about the Coriolis force as a direct measurement of the fact the earth is rotating, or mechanical gyrocompasses requiring the earth to
Yep.
rotate in order to function, or the fact that,
Yes.
you know, if I weigh this pen here or this pencil here,
Hmm.
and calibrate it to a scale, and then I take the pencil and the scale to Florida, this pen will be lighter because of centrifugal force countering gravity. They don't think about these
Right.
things, or how a Foucault pendulum works. And that's
Hmm.
the same type of mentality you run into with anti-vaxxers, which is why you should never try and engage an anti-vaxxer unless you actually have the information to do it. Because they will just, all you're doing is you're giving them the opportunity to put out their ideas. They don't care if they're not there to convince you, they're there to get the information out. The thing that you need to do to stop this sort of stuff is, number one, you need to expose the people writing it, which is what we're doing. You need to stop the transmission of this to a susceptible audience. And then hopefully we can educate the audience a little bit so they don't, we show them the tricks that they use.
Right.
And maybe give them a little ammunition to fight it with, so that they're not, they don't have that little thing in their head that says, oh, that makes sense. Well, no, it really doesn't make sense, and this is why.
The way I look at it is, there are these conspiracy theorists have their bubbles where they isolate themselves, and they support each other and feel like their own community, and they share stuff within that bubble. You and I doing this, there probably aren't many people within that bubble that we're going to reach, that we're going to change their minds.
No.
However, I think that by putting this kind of content out on the internet, maybe vulnerable people who are susceptible to that kind of thinking, or people who are on the fence, or people who, have a family member in that bubble, and they're saying things, and the family member's like, well, I can't argue with that. I don't know what you're talking about. And they get curious and they go looking. Hopefully those kinds of people find our content, and then that bubble doesn't get bigger. That's, I think, a reasonable hope that I have with my content, and I'm sure with your content as well.
I got a call the other day from a certain rifle association that operates on a national basis.
Great.
Looking for funds. And, it was, so what do you think about Joe Biden's law, proposed law to outlaw semi-automatic rifles? Oh, really? What law would that be? Well, they're in legislatures all over the country. Does the President of the United States propose legislation? Well, no, he really doesn't, does he? Okay. And, at the end, the lady was sitting there, a really nice lady. She says, that makes a lot of sense, but I still got to make these calls. So you reach them occasionally. That woman's not going to go home and do a subscription to a national organization about rifles. And, and it's funny. I'm former military, and I used to be a member of them. I've got guns all over the place. It's not that I don't like guns. I just don't like them. I don't like people that go out and try and blatantly manipulate other people. I guess we probably ought to close it down there. We've got some more people coming up in the future. We may be actually finishing up here pretty quick, but I know we have at least one big one that we still have to do. Oh, we all know who that is, don't we? All right. So, in any event, this is Bob the Science Guy signing out from Northern Michigan. Dr. Dan, thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with me. Folks, make sure you stop by his channel. Hit him a like and a subscribe. He's got a full-time job and a new baby, and he still took the time to come on over and have a chat with me and lay some good information on you. So show him a little Google love there. All right? Good night, Dan. We'll talk to you later.
Appreciate that, Bob, and everyone, take care.
Feel my brain getting real sore.